Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This is a movie that I missed originally. Almost everyone told me to sort of catch up with, and I eventually saw it while I was sick with COVID. So hopefully I remember it pretty good because I was kind of sick when I watched it. But this is a very fun kind of movie. It kind of fulfills on the promise we saw of Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley that we saw in the last film they made, which I also didn't get to review, but have seen since then, Game Night, and the promise of Chris Pine as a star, which I honestly haven't seen done as well since the original Star Trek, or the one he was in. I did quite like this movie. I do like kind of more fun, loose fantasy when the characters are saying this. Willow is a movie I look back on fondly. Maybe no one else does, but I do. And it kind of shows you the kind of nice, quippy Hollywood version of these kind of groups that we all actually enjoy to watch. I know people get sick of the idea of someone going, and that happened, or something like that. And we're kind of sick of those things. And I agree, that does get annoying. But there's a difference between when that shit actually really works and when it doesn't. And I think with Dungeons and Dragons in this, it does work. What's interesting about those two as directors, they really make very Hollywood kind of tight screenplay showcase for stars in a big Hollywood movie kind of things, which a lot of movie directors aren't as good at anymore. I feel like they feel like mid-budget directors in a time where mid-budget stuff is gone. But this, there's a real love of the quest, the journey, the fantasy of it. I didn't grow up playing Dungeons and Dragons. Every time I did, people would explain a lot of rules to me, and I'd get super bored and find it to be endlessly complicated. And then I'd be like, when do we play? And they're like, tomorrow. And I'd be like, fuck you. And then I played Hero Quest instead, or something else, even though I didn't really like fantasy. But I never got to hang out with the people who were fun at it. Maybe I'm throwing shade. I hope whoever that was, doesn't watch this video. And I think fantasy can do that. Fantasy can feel daunting. No one was gonna explain the gelatinous cube to me or something like that. Fantasy can feel very daunting, and the kind of trick of from Lord of the Rings to even what Willow does, I'm a Willow apologist, sorry, or the Lord of the Rings movies, is that they make a world that can feel complex into very easy to go down as a viewer, and something that's very inviting and interesting, and you are interested in it. And I think that movie does this very, very well. It did feel very kind of fun and refreshing in a blockbuster way that I wasn't entirely expecting. This is about Chris Pine is playing an adventurer kind of guy. He is imprisoned with Michelle Rodriguez. They have to get out so he can get his daughter, only to find out they were kind of screwed over by a wizard, and Hugh Grant being very post Paddington, having actual fun in big movies, Hugh Grant, which is great. He has taken his daughter. He has raised her sort of as his own. He is a big guy in this kind of town, and he basically won't let him take his daughter back and is screwing him over, so they have to go on a quest to figure out a way to get in and stop all this and get his daughter back and stuff. And he gets a changeling lady, shapeshifter person lady, and a wizard played by Justice Smith, who is sort of not great but is better than he realizes, as well as the guy from Bridgerton, a show I didn't watch, is also in it to sort of help them as they are riffing along, speaking as we do in this crazy world, to find a quest to get his daughter back and stop whatever Hugh Grant is up to get back their treasure and come about their lives. So they find out he's on to more than they could have ever imagined. They try to stop him to do what is right in the end. Now, I think one thing about the direction is I've heard people compare this to Guardians of the Galaxy. I've heard various bizarre comparisons of this, which seem to be I get a little confused when I looked up the reviews of this, to be honest with you. Movie Bob's specifically, I clicked on that one, and that was a real deep dive in me not wanting to watch him ever again. I don't know where he got half the things he said, but sure, man. Not to throw shade, but it was anyway. I think what John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein do in this is they do combine kind of them as very good kind of workman-like directors, but also combine some really great sequences in this that were actually really smart. And I don't believe Second Unit just put that all together, particularly because I saw their other movie, and it just seems like, I think that's sort of what's expected of you. You have to have some good sequences in these things. In particular, one where a girl who shapeshifts into various animals keeps changing into animals as she does this whole, she steals something, I forget, but she is running, and she keeps, during the chase, she keeps transforming, and that was a really inspired sequence. Sort of a better version of what happened in Nimona. Interestingly, I'm surprised, even though I guess what she did was animation in that regard, as well as like they do this thing with these like kind of portals and trying to like get into a safe and stuff, and that was actually really cool. They had a couple really good sequences that were very visually arresting that you wouldn't expect from what was going on there. This did remind me of the Willow Show, but it also reminded me of Hal Needham and how Hal Needham would work with Burt Reynolds. And I got that from Chris Pine a lot, especially like it felt like Michelle Rodriguez was having fun. It felt like everyone was kind of feeding off of his energy in the way that like I remember, man, it really sucks that they don't have like more fun stuff for Chris Pine to do, because that first Star Trek, I remember that summer, and people were like, man, that guy is so, like, people were just like raving about him. And I know he was in like Good and Unstoppable and a few things, but like they really have not, it really made me go like, they really fucked up, because this guy's like mad fucking good in this. Anyway, seriously was bothering me while I was watching this. But his Hell and High Water was good, but he just like doesn't get to do the movie star thing as much. I did think it was different than, you know, something like Willow or the Willow Show. I'm a little surprised like the Willow Show gets evaporated from all existence. It's not Dungeons & Dragons' fault. And I'm not mad at the public. I don't have like a bitter feud or something. But it's interesting, like people love this movie. I hear it referenced all the time. People talk about it all the time. People are like so in love with this, and like how the Willow Show like sort of came and went. Maybe it's because like this is its own thing. Maybe it's because the Willow Show kind of had you at the main troupe and they were jokey and everyone else sort of wasn't. And in this, like everybody's joking silly except for the guy from Bridgerton, who that's like a whole bit, and he's actually really good at playing straight off of them. I remember lots of people said like his career choice after that big show were not great, and I was like, I don't know, he like makes a kind of nice little meal out of this. It's like you definitely remember him, and he's like such a straightforward like character in this, as like a guy who's like, you know, been around for a million years and is a wizard and all this stuff. Like I thought he did a really good job. I do think maybe like people like their fantasy, but they like it. Like if you like this movie, I would say watch the Willow Show, but I guess you can't, so I guess, I don't know. I was just like, it was like, how is this like such a thing, guys? Come on. And Willow was like way gayer than this too, so you guys should, I mean, come on, let's give the Willow Show more credit. But that's not Dungeons & Dragons' fault, different studio. But I did think it is interesting how this film in a sense feels far more corporate than most of the films I'd expect people to love in this era, where people are complaining about blockbusters and stuff like that. But I really, like, I'm not like trying to oversell John Franciselli and Jonathan Goldstein, but I do think like if you didn't have them directing it, you wouldn't fall in love with this thing. If you had, it feels pedestrian directed, but its direction is not just about like fucking cameras and sequences and stuff like that. Although they do that in certain things, it is kind of shot more in a bland way. Except for that, it is also about performance. It's also understanding tone. It's also understanding the writing. And almost if you can get that shit to work, you can almost get the whole movie to work. And I think that's actually what happened in here. There are definitely a lot better directed movies on technical levels than Dungeons & Dragons. However, at the same point, you don't have one that has as much heart in it. Now, maybe it's because John Franciselli, we know, played Dungeons & Dragons, and I do find it interesting that there's never a point in it where you see people around a table like riffing and doing stuff, and maybe they knew they had to just keep it in the world because you have all these various things and referencing things. And I would actually be interested in listening to an interview like, how did they come about this? Because I know this wasn't their original thing. It was like developed by like Chris McKay and other people, and then they did the screenplay and stuff. Or to my limited understanding, like that they don't have, you know, have like a dual thing where you have people like playing Dungeons & Dragons, the game, and like messing with the characters. Like you could have done that, but they don't do that at all. And I understand Dungeons & Dragons very questy and stuff, but as a kid who grew up watching Will a lot of times and watching whatever random ass fantasy thing the Sci-Fi Channel had on, which was never good, this is a really fun fantasy film. It's a lot of fun. It's really, really good, and it gets the kind of light, like, I want to have, you know, a beer with my friends who also like fantasy films and laugh and have a good time. And as serious as I think they took this in the world, I don't think they were light about that, and I don't think they were like encumbered by it, and I don't think they were bad at doing that. I think they got like the core essence of what these films need to be, and as you know, as long as you have the gelatinous cube and like various references that I probably didn't get, and I feel like one of the other teams at one point was the cartoon show. I did watch the cartoon show back in the day, actually on Saturday morning, so it's not my fault it got canceled, but this is fun. This was a fun movie. I don't think anyone was really wrong about this. I can see this, like, if no one watches stuff on TV anymore, but if this was like streaming somewhere or something, I would highly suggest this to like a family or something with it. I think the problem is people will think it's like dorkier or nerdier than it really is, because it's not really that much. You don't really need to know anything about Dungeons & Dragons. So I'm here to say they're right. I think these guys should be doing probably others. I know they had something to do with the Spider-Man Homecoming and various other things and, you know, game night and stuff. But I definitely see more of their potential as big directors. And I hope they get to do something really cool. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a superhero movie or something like that, but I think they showed they can handle a budget and handle a big property to make it still talked about. Like, this came out in March and it's September, and I hear about this movie every fucking day, and I'm a little surprised at the love for it, but I think it's because it's so watchable, it's so much fun, it sort of takes you by surprise, because as I was watching, I was like, man, this is having so much fun with this crazy world. Like, it brings up things, but on a dumb reference way. It's like they had this thing with like a character, like Jonathan, I think, and they like have to do this bit with him, and then they have him with the wings and stuff, and it's like more playing it like someone who's used to that world, like he's the guy who they know, you know, brings the best coffee or donuts in the workplace, and less like he's the winged creature. And I think that really works for it. Also, you know, I think also the difference between this and Willow is you have some jokey people in a crazy world, much like how Star Wars worked, or the original trilogy, where you had Han Solo and Luke and Leia, and they're like riffing and being silly, and like there's this Jedi stuff and a Death Star and all that stuff. And in this, everybody's jokey. It's just like a whole full comedy thing in a way that I don't even think Guardians of the Galaxy or any of that stuff does. So it's I think that's interesting to do it in the way they did it in this and have it work as well as it does. And maybe nothing in this film is different or revolutionary, and maybe this is more showing the directors of this film as craftsmen, but I don't think what Chris Pine's natural charisma and Michelle Rodriguez giving probably one of her better performances I've seen her in a long time. Like, she had way more fun in this than the Fast and Furious movies. I think there's a love of being a craftsman, but I think there's something more going on. And if they are not able to get these kind of performances, and two of the films I've seen from them feel like basic kind of studio films, and I was like, I'm not going to see that in theaters. I don't know, that's not my thing. And then both times I see them late, and both times I'm like, oh man, that was like, even if I don't love everything about the construction or something, it's so effortlessly done, you almost feel like filmmaking is easy. But this kind of filmmaking is not easy. It's precise and smart and well trained, and I think that is why you kind of fall in love with it, because it makes you feel like it's natural, even though people, you know, are fighting demons and dragons, and is there not that many dragons in this? There are dungeons though, and all those crazy things in it, and you kind of just fall into this natural world, feeling like it's a group of you and your friends, and their naturalism together. They're just really effortlessly good at, and it makes it just a fun, easy, breezy watch into something that you think would be a lot more complicated, but feels kind of like as natural as breathing air. And that's kind of what a great kind of studio director can do. So if you've seen Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.